The Kethri warpack should have killed her at dawn. They found the human half buried in drifted snow at the edge of a frost valley, her exploration suit torn, her beacon dead, her breath coming in thin, stubborn clouds. The binary stars above the horizon made the ice shine like split glass. A young hunter named Fen stood over her with his claws out, trembling from cold and adrenaline and every warning he'd ever been taught. Humans were trouble. Humans were fire and hunger and lies, the elders said. Humans brought chaos to worlds that had been quiet. Fen stared at her anyway. She didn't reach for a weapon. She barely moved at all. She just opened her eyes, flat, forward-facing, painfully awake, and tried to speak through cracked lips. "Water," she whispered. Fen should have stepped back. He should have ended it quickly and cleanly. That would have been the safe choice. Instead, he swallowed hard, hooked his arm under her shoulders, and dragged her toward the den. Curiosity beat caution. For now. The elders hissed the moment Fen brought her inside. The den cavern was warm with steam vents and packed bodies, silver fur and slow breathing, the smell of ashen dried meat. Hunters lined the edges like statues. Cubs peeked from behind legs and tails, wide-eyed and silent. The elders didn't look at the human as a person. They looked at her as a risk. "She is not pack," snarled Elder Reth, his voice heavy with age. "She is human." "She is broken," Fen argued, voice shaking. "The code forbids killing those who cannot fight." The word code did what it always did. It locked jaws. It slowed claws. They dragged the human to the heat stones anyway and laid her there like an unwanted burden. "She stays until thaw," Elder Reth declared. "Then she leaves." The human blinked at them. Her chest rose and fell. She didn't understand their language yet, but she understood the tone. She nodded once, small, grateful, and closed her eyes. Her name, when she could finally say it, was Nora. The thaw came, then went, and Nora remained. At first, she survived. That alone seemed to offend some of the elders. Humans were supposed to be fragile in Kethri winters. Humans were supposed to give up. Nora didn't. She learned their clicks and growls with an embarrassing speed, her human throat struggling, then adapting, until she could say simple things without the translator. "Thank you. I will work. I understand." She didn't demand their food. She didn't demand their space. She took what they offered and paid it back in labor, patching broken heat ducts with scraps from her wreck, reinforcing the den's outer doors, repairing tools the pack had used for generations without truly understanding. The elders watched with suspicion. The cubs watched with wonder. Because the cubs were the first to decide something the elders weren't ready to admit. This human was safe. They began to approach her in the quiet hours. At first, it was one small cub, fluffy, gray-striped, eyes too big for his face, climbing onto her blanket while she rested by the fire. Nora froze like she'd been given something sacred. Then she lifted one hand slowly and scratched behind his ear. The cub purred. Not a polite purr. A full-body rumble that made other cubs look up like they'd heard a dinner bell. By the end of the week, Nora couldn't sit by the fire without getting buried. A golden cub would crawl into her lap. A cream-striped one would wedge under her arm. Two would compete shamelessly for the warmest spot against her ribs. They learned her scent. They learned her voice. They learned that her hands, soft, strange hands, didn't hurt. Nora began to tell them stories. Not war stories. Not human glory. Stories that sounded like impossible places to cubs who'd never left the valley. Oceans wider than horizons, cities that touched clouds, storms that didn't bring ice but rain, music that made crowds cry for no reason they could explain. Even the elders began to linger near the fire when she spoke. They pretended it was to listen for threats. But their ears angled toward her anyway. Winter sickness came on the third season. It struck fast and cruel, creeping through the den like a silent predator. The very young began to cough. The old grew weak. Hunters who had fought glacier beasts stumbled like drunkards. The pack's healers did what they could. It was not enough. Elder Reth announced the quarantine, voice thick with dread. The weak must remain in the inner den. No one enters unless they must. Nora stepped forward. She should have backed away. Her immune system wasn't built for Kethri plagues. She should have protected herself. Instead, she said, "Show me." The healers hesitated. Elder Retha's eyes narrowed. "You will die." Nora's face tightened. "Then I die trying." And she went in. She worked until her hands split. She boiled water until the air stung with steam. She mixed Kethri herbs with the last clean antiseptics from her shattered medkit, turning old remedies into something sharper, something that actually pushed back. And when the cubs shook with fever, Nora held them. She rocked them against her chest like she'd been born for it. She sang. No one understood the words, but the sound mattered. The cubs stopped panicking when her voice wrapped around them. They slept because she refused to let them feel alone in the dark. 17 lived who should not have. By the time the sickness broke, the den smelled of ash and exhaustion and something else. Respect. A hunt leader named Breck, once Nora's loudest outer, stood beside her at dawn and said, quietly, "You stayed." Nora's voice was hoarse. "They are cubs." Breck stared at her like that sentence was a weapon. "Humans are strange." Nora managed a tired smile. "I've heard." Breck exhaled, slow and steady. "Pack sister," he said. It was not a ceremonial title. It was worse. It was real. The raiders arrived on the 5th season. They came from the sky in black shapes that blotted stars, ships dropping like predatory birds, engines screaming, lights scanning the snowfields. They called themselves the VYN. Slavers. Traders of living things. Collectors of pelts and bones and rare predator cubs. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They did not expect a pack to fight. The first strike hit the outer dens. Plasma fire tore through ice doors. Hunters fell back, dragging cubs into the deep caverns where heat lived in the stone and the old tunnels twisted like a maze. The War Council gathered in the Heart Den, elders, leaders, healers, and Nora, standing at the edge with her jaw clenched so hard it ached. "We cannot win in open snow," Breck growled. "Their weapons are sky fire." Elder Retha's voice cracked with old rage. "Then we die in the caverns." Nora stepped forward. The den went quiet. Even the cubs stopped moving. "Let me go to them," Nora said. Elder Reth snapped his head toward her. "No. I can negotiate," she insisted. "They'll talk to a human. I can buy time. I can." "You are pack," Breck cut in, voice sharp. "We do not trade pack." Nora met his eyes. "I'm not asking to be traded." Then she did the most human thing possible. She moved when no one was ready. That night, Nora slipped out through the upper ice falls, climbing with shaking hands and stubborn breath, her plasma cutter strapped tight against her ribs. Fen followed. He didn't know how to stop her. He didn't even know if he wanted to. He just knew he couldn't let her face them alone. From the ridge, Fen watched Nora walk into the VWN camp. A circle of harsh lights. Alien silhouettes. Weapon barrels tracking her like they'd been waiting for an excuse. Nora raised her hands. Not in surrender. In clarity. The VWN captain stepped forward, armor gleaming, voice slick with confidence. "A human," he said in galactic common. "Interesting." Nora's tone stayed even. "Leave the dens. Take supplies. Take metal. Take fuel cells. But you don't take cubs." The captain laughed like she'd told a joke. "The pelts are worth more," he said. "And now we have a human too. Why are you with animals?" Nora's eyes turned cold. "They're not animals," she said. "They are people." The captain tilted his head as if tasting the word. "People," he repeated, amused. "Will you watch them die for your sentiment?" Nora's voice dropped. "No," she said softly. "You will." She moved, fast. Not graceful, but decisive. A concealed plasma torch flared once, bright and clean, and the captain staggered back in shock. Nora grabbed his fallen rifle as his guards shouted and raised weapons. She fired 3 shots. 3 bodies dropped. The camp erupted into chaos. And then the return fire found her. A single impact. Nora stumbled. Snow swallowed her knees. Fenn's breath caught in his throat. Nora fell onto her back, staring up at the hard sky as if she was angry at it. White turned dark beneath her. Not dramatic. Just real. Fenn let out a howl that tore the night open. The den heard it. The cubs heard it. The ones Nora had held during fever. The ones she'd fed by the fire. The ones who had learned her scent meant safety. They came. Hunters and elders poured from the caverns like an avalanche with teeth. And the cubs, small, fluffy, furious, followed as if their bodies were tiny but their hearts were made of steel. Fenn reached Nora first. She was still breathing, barely. Her eyes found his, and she smiled. That strange human expression the pack had learned meant love. "Run," she whispered. Fenn looked up and saw Vuan soldiers advancing through smoke and scattered light. He placed himself over Nora without thinking. And the cubs arranged themselves beside him. Small forms. Bared fangs. Shaking with terror and determination. Breck arrived a heartbeat later, claws out, eyes burning. He saw Nora in the snow. Then he looked at the Vuan. And the pack's restraint snapped. "Run!" Breck roared, not at the pack, but at the invaders. His voice carried every story Nora had told. Every life she had saved. Every lesson she had carved into their pride. The VYN hesitated. That hesitation cost them everything. The pack hit like a storm. Not a battle. A reckoning. Dawn broke over frozen peaks. Vuan ships burned in the distance, retreating or broken, their confidence scattered like ash. Their weapons lay abandoned in the snow because no weapon mattered once fear got inside the hand holding it. The pack dragged Nora back to the den. Healers worked until their arms shook. They used everything Nora had taught them, every mixture, every method, every stubborn refusal to accept impossible. And Nora, being human, refused to die just out of spite. Weeks passed. Then one night, the den's fire cracked softly, and Nora's eyes opened. She blinked. Tried to lift her head. A pile of cubs shifted against her chest. Grey-striped. Golden. Cream. Fluffy warmth pressed into her ribs like living blankets. Their purring filled the air, a steady vibration, as if they decided she wasn't allowed to leave again. Breck sat beside her, silent as stone. Nora's voice was weak, but still hers. "You should have run." Breck's ears flicked forward. A Ketheri smile, small, sharp, real. "Pack does not run," he said. Then, quieter, "You taught us that." Nora's eyes filled. She turned her face away like she didn't want anyone to see. But the cubs didn't understand shame. They only understood feeling. They nuzzled closer, confused until Fenn murmured, gentle, "These are not sad tears." He swallowed. Humans cry when their hearts are too full. Nora made a broken sound that was half laugh, half sob. And for the first time since crashing on this frozen world, she let herself weep without fighting it. Above her, carved into the den wall beside the ancestral marks, the pack had etched something new. A human hand. Surrounded by claw prints. And beneath it, words in both scripts, simple enough for any cub to read. "She fell for us. We rose for her. This is pack." Nora stared at the carving until her vision blurred again. Then she closed her eyes. And the cubs kept purring like guardians. Like family. Like home. If this story hit your heart, drop a like and subscribe for more HFY. This is Survival Arena HFY, and the next story is already coming.